Hi there, Randy Green here, a different podcast because I'm not going to continue in the same manner as I did in podcast one. Podcast one is typically where I lay the foundation, but I'm not going to go into all, then we can sum it up and then these are the solutions and these are the answers and then we can move on. As always, we are dealing with processes here. And I know for many of you, this is a difficult exercise to do. Many of you are just, as I were when I was younger, oriented towards give me the answers. I just need to do the answers. That's a shortcut. That's your brain that wants to do the shortcut. But what I want you to do is to fill out the blanks with different levels of scientific information, as well as later on when you begin to activate the higher levels of neural network with the density sciences, the higher order sciences. So you both have the lower order sciences and the higher order sciences. So you don't just jump to conclusions, which the brain would love to do because it wants to save energy. So it just wants to know one or two things and then you fill in the blanks with whatever you know and you come up with all sorts of fancy solutions to whatever. And we can easily, easy peasy, agree that nobody has the truth, nobody has the answers, nobody knows what is up and down and what is the head or the tail or whatever we're dealing with. Nobody knows how the elephant really looks because the light is off. And I'm here alluding to the old saying of 6 sages that are locked into a dark room with no light, and in the middle of the room is an elephant, and they are positioned each side of the elephant, and they are discussing what they're actually touching, because that's all they can do. They can touch, but they can't see. And they're all agreeing. They are not agreeing. They are disagreeing on whatever is going on, and they're arguing, and they are yelling at each other because one has the tail, one has the trunk, one has the foot, one has the tooth, etc. And they are all disagreeing on what it actually is because they can't see the entire picture. We are in the same process. So let us not argue. Let us not yell at each other. But those of you, I can look and see that quite a lot of you are doing video 1. But you're not doing video 2 because you go, yawn. I just want this kind of thrilling information that kind of puts in motion some kind of dopamine reward system kick off in the middle of your brain that is connected to your emotions of impatience, of kind of, come on, get to the point. And I know that impatience. I would love to get things holographically fed into my brain, which I'm completely accustomed to, having worked with different groups that are part of other realities for the last 15 years. So yeah, I'd love the downloads and not all of these linear, slow, fuck up processes of explanations. And you kind of, Randy, you're too boring. And that's okay. That's fine. I get it. Yes, I am boring, but there is actually a purpose with it. And that is to understand how your brain works. And that's part of neurobiology. And you can look that up, and that's the anatomy. And you have got all the scientists that are telling you that when you think this way and when you do that way, then blood flows into that area and that amplifies it. And that supports the neural network and that makes the synapses kick off. And yes, it depends on the type of DNA that you have got that ignites specific levels of the dendrites. It's kind of, we all have the same DNA, but we ignite on different levels, all depending on the electrochemical structure of our body. That means that different kinds of receptors are activated, and that's what's called epigenetics. Look it all up, study it, and you'll kind of understand. So what makes different receptors kick off, and what does different kind of unpack different levels of the DNA, which we also know when we talk about the colonic sciences and the cell activation ideas, that is actually trauma and the way you were brought up. So you can have two completely similar, let's play with that idea, people, but one you put through emotional abuse, the other one you give a good childhood, and they will ignite different levels of the brain. Robert Sapolsky has done a lot of study on that one, and he's got some good from Stanford information out on YouTube as well. I typically refer to that as human behavior, human biology, or something like that. You can look it up. Robert Sapolsky has done a good job. He studied baboons to begin with, which I find very interesting, because when we talk about the beast, the animal man and the animal female, when we talk biology, our physicality is not so different and what's going on amongst different types of primates. Okay, so that was another point. So back to the Quelle. So here you're getting, what I'm telling you here is, when we talk alternative perception of reality, when we're talking double awareness, when we're talking about dealing with aliens and conceptualization of why the aliens are here, or spiritual matters, or religion, or anything that goes with what we could call a different perception, alternate reality perception, we could say already within the normal frequency-based neural network, within the general population, we are seeing that playing out every single day. We are having groups that are coming out with a lot of information that might or might not be true. We don't know anymore because we are in an information overload system. So we don't really know what's up and what's down and what's true and what's not. So in that stressing environment, we begin to select information. We select what we find to be, this is what I want to believe in, because that suits my comfort zone. That suits my belief system. That suits my emotional structure. It fits as hand in glove where I feel comfortable, where I feel special, where I feel that I'm something this or that or whatever. And you'll kind of say, why do I need to understand these psychological dynamics? Yeah, people can think whatever they want to do. Yeah, we got far right wing or whatever. But this is part of when we begin to understand the battle that we are in, which is very similar to what happened 100 years ago. Do a little bit of history, look up some of the far right tendencies, democracy, not that it was in same play as it is now, but all of these things, we are resuming to earlier stages of human civilizations that we have had in earlier times. That's why I put in the fall of civilizations. Listen through these podcasts and you'll get a good historical insight from many different cultures around the world, because there is a kind of system that what happens in the quote unquote different stages when a civilization, I'm not going to say the end times, but when a civilization has a peak, there are certain dynamics. There are certain dynamics when it rises up to its highest level. We saw that with the Roman Empire as well. There are certain dynamics, and then it peaks. And we have that in businesses as well. We have that in life. We have it all the way around. It's kind of a program in human societal systems. It's like a system chaos, from where a system goes from order into chaos when it peaks and it goes into entropy. There are these dynamics. And we can all add it in, and that's where some scientists will say, yeah, that's just fringe. Especially when I was younger, it was completely impossible to combine different scientific systems. That was kind of a no-no. But today we have more and more scientists today have kind of begin to understand, yeah, we can't really say and keep sciences within their own box because everything is interconnected. So they're getting more and more to that. So if we are to truly understand reality, we need to cross the different levels of information, but within their correct scientific paradigms. And that's where many of us that are doing this, that are not that doesn't have a university degree, that has not done the mythology of sciences, that have not learned these processes of how to deal with information in the correct manner, are jumping to easy conclusions, are jumping into, yeah, this fits my personal narrative, so that's why I interpret it in that way, including when we do alternate perception. For instance, when we work with clairvoyance, people in my time, I have been around clairvoyant people, and I'm clairvoyant myself. And it all goes into your emotional field. How do you interpret things through your emotional field? It's an extra, you're an empath, but with an extra ability to it. You're able to decode people's emotional field. You're sensing people's emotional field, which animals do as well. Animals are clairvoyant. But they process the information in a different way. They process it as smell, which is very interesting. Dogs, their smell actually around in the minefield of a dog. When they smell something, different colors ignite in their brain. It's very, very interesting to observe, actually. Trees have different colors as well. You call that aura, but actually I call it, these are the electrochemical processes, because we know from when you do spectral analysis, you know different chemicals have different colors. They're part of different color spectrum, different parts of visible light. When the electrons are ignited, so to speak, lift up to a higher ring from where they then will resume their original position. As they do so, they burn off energy. And that's the kinetic effect that gives off light. So we kind of see when things are transforming, it gives up some light, it gives off some kind of color, all depending what the compound is. So it's nothing big in that one. It's not the aura. It's just the processes of your body that someone is capable of seeing. Like animals, it depends on how broad a perception field that you have gotten. That's part of the higher order sciences, and that's part of the higher order sensing, where you can have expanded sight, expanded smell, expanded hearing, expanded sensing, as in kind of sensing energy with what your emotional field. But you can also have a more sensitivity in your physical form, which typically connects with already being sensitive on the other levels, because you have this excited, different type of nervous system, which we're seeing in many of the new kids. And it as, of course, being put into different classifications, because you can't really, for instance, some of these hybrid kids they have enormous amount of energy that kind of makes their body go all the time. Are they really hyperactive, or do they just have a different type of central nervous system that works in a different way? And that keeps reminding me of a neighbor I had years ago, and I was talking to him, and he had got the diagnosis of being ADHD. And he said, well, I actually see myself as having an older version of the human nervous system, where I have to be alert all the time because I see threats everywhere. And I think whether that's correct or not, I think it's a fair assessment he have made of who and what he was, instead of going into the diagnosis. I'm kind of disabled. He was on social income, and he was not really capable of doing much, and he was smoking too much weed to calm himself down, which I'm seeing a lot of these kids are doing, which again, as I said, I worked with drug addicts, including the ones that began with smoking marijuana when they were young, and then they didn't develop their brain capacity. They didn't get into the frontal lobe system. They got stuck in the emotional system. And that's where you have the addiction center. That's where you have the reward center. That's where you're choosing solutions that leads to reward. That's where you are stuck in that kind of desire, hedonic, materialistic perception of your body. It's all about just feeling comfortable. It's all just about feeling good. Whereas if you lift it up to what we call the self-transcendence, that's where you begin to do service to others. That's where you begin focusing on, well, I'm doing this for the greater good, or for the highest good of the many. This is something else than me. I'm outside of who and what I am. I'm no longer just focused on my own personal relief and desire systems, but actually push myself into giving a purpose of why I should go against this naturally biologically driven service to self, service to survival instinct that are part of our physical form. So you need the frontal lobes to do that. That's why I do the exercise to begin with, the meditation and the heart field exercise I explain in my basic energy work, as well as in some of my free material. But also going into when we're working higher with the higher levels of the brain, you need to activate the frontal lobes to keep you going. So for those who are still in that instinctual, emotional, desire-driven, materialistic orientation, that typically stuck there due to different types of childhood abuse or emotional difficulties, or it's difficult to lift themselves out of that. They easily get depressed and suicidal and all these kind of things that goes with being stuck in that meaningless type of life. And that's what Viktor Frankl talked about. And that's what existential psychotherapy is about. You need a purpose. And that's, again, as I said, that's been used in different groups within society. And my purpose here is to try and teach you a different type of purpose, where the purpose is not religion. The purpose is not to connect to your guides. The purpose is not a God. The purpose is not to activate your DNA, because how many have succeeded in that? Just asking the questions, you tell me. And how does it play out? What are the signs of it? Again, we need to ask these questions. So what is the purpose for you? What gives your life a purpose that is not political and ideology, that kind of goes into some kind of segregation dynamics or separation or them against us dynamics, but some kind of unity empathy idea. That's the compassion meditation, the Dalai Lama compassion meditation. And I'm going a little bit back here because that we can go back into. That's the basic level of the pituitary system that goes with the heart field, that activates your central nervous system and your peripheral nervous system into a higher level. That's where you really begin to activate the chakras, if you like. But the chakras are just energy centers you technically create behind the glands. And they connect to that golden substance that you activate in your pituitary. But you can only activate the pituitary on the right level because it's connected to the different types of glands and the electrochemical processes of the peripheral nervous system. If you are focusing your emotional field to push it into the frontal lobes, where you push from being emotionally instinctual driven, desire-based driven, as in me and my comfort zone, I need to protect that, and defense mechanisms and all sorts of constructions and narratives that self-justify why you're being a dick, why you're being an asshole, why you are responding in ways that you know are morally and ethically wrong. Why do you do that? And then you self-justify and put it into all sorts of weird narratives that allows you to be that asshole. So let us move beyond that and get into the frontal lobes, where we're actually looking at things from above. We're doing the observer. We're having a completely different type of brain structure in the frontal lobes that kickstarts a whole new level of processes of the brain. And that's where sciences come in, because they are based upon asking questions, finding solutions, finding answers, a different mythology than when you work with emotions. Emotions are all about what you feel, what is right for you. And emotions and feelings are technically two different things. Emotions are the electrochemical processes. Fear, that's an emotion. But how you feel about it is always based upon belief systems and what you have learned in childhood, how you have learned to deal with these things. As again, if you have had a lot of stresses in your childhood, it's difficult for you to balance yourself. It's difficult for you to find solutions to the problem in front of you. Instead, you regress into a childish state where you go into a frenzy, you go into panic, your adrenal glands kick off, activates the amygdala, you're pushed back into your fear system or flight system or aggressive system or whatever it is. And you are not responding rationally. You're not responding with your frontal lobe, understanding what you're actually dealing with. And that's probably what, if you ask me, what's the main purpose of your teachings, Randy? That is to live people as everybody else that began the spiritual journey. They will come to that process of the divide between emotional connection to become what we call rationally, logically, mentally observing, studying, working with the information system they have chosen to be their purpose. So we here understand the purpose is a way to lift us out of the limbic system, of the emotional field. We need purpose to orient ourselves in space while we are doing things. There are two main streams of energy that flows in the brain. You have what's called the ventral stream that kind of goes from the little brain, from the back of the head, and to the left side where it actually creates language. And then you have the dorsal, or the middle one, that kind of goes from, again, back of the head to the frontal lobes. And the one in the middle is connected to action. It's connected to thought processes. It's connected to rational ways of doing things, where you can say the left one is more connected to the limbic system. That's, if you look at infants, they have this whole training process of learning to get the body under control. It's very amazing to observe, actually, how that little lump of flesh becomes a living being, how it trains itself, how the DNA, the code systems in the body unfolds different segments, how the soul that's captured in that little body, typically they are actually, most of the infants I've been in contact with, I'm not saying everybody, but the ones I've been in contact with, until the age of 3 or 4, they are telepathic. You are in connection with whoever the true soul that is coming in. I can communicate with them, and they get frustrated of I'm this fucking body again. I need to get control of it. I need to learn how to work. I need to take control of the neural network. I need to take control of the peripheral nervous system. I need to take control of the central nervous system. I need to get my body processes to work. I need to learn to speak. And that's actually the ventral stream. It's interesting to observe. The child has this kind of, it's all depending on the age of the soul, begin with this kind of weird sound, like when when you are deaf. It's kind of the same sound. You are making sound, but because you can't hear the nuances, because you're deaf, that's the hearing. That's the ventral stream that comes in, because you have your language center more or less above the left ear. And of course, you can push it to the right side, but that's typically where most have it. So that's part of that one. That's some of the first thing the child is learning. At the same time, more or less, the child is learning to crawl and learning to take control of the legs, the whole exploring of the body. What is this? What are my hands? What are the side? And the side is the first thing. And side is connected to the back of the head, the occipital lobe, very difficult word, at the back of the head. And that's part of both the dorsal stream and the ventral stream. But that's part of the first stages of what the infant learns to control. Sight, looking at mom, finding the breast. Smell is also part of it. And smell is actually part of the reward system. And it's interesting when we talk about, and it's part of the frontal lobes. It's the lowest levels of the frontal lobe. And it's actually interesting in the Baylor material about one of the last things that kicks in at the higher order senses is actually what we call the higher order smell. The first thing that kicks in is the higher order sight. Well, it goes without saying. You had the infant that begins seeing. So that's the first thing the brain develops. That's sight on the base level. First level, sight, smell, language, and then orientation in space. That actually comes a little bit earlier. So let me do that one again. You have sight, smell, orientation in space, control of the physicality, again, hearing. I can't remember it again. Sorry. I'm trying to create a scheme of what activates first. And I'm jumping all around because I haven't really thought that through, but it has a specific dynamic, again, depending on the age of the soul. But when we talk about the higher order senses, they more or less follow, let's do a more simple version. The way you unfolded the different segments of your brain when you were getting control of your body is the same way that the higher order senses develop in you. So sight is the first one. Clairvoyance is the first one. Then you have the extrasensory perception of fields around you. That's at least how I had it. This kind of sensing things that were adding to my body that my mind couldn't see, but I could sense it. Entities, different things touching my skin, making me feel different. My nervous system, my peripheral nervous system, sensing things that were there, and then developing the ability to put it into some kind of context where I could derive the information of what I was sensing and seeing. And I think that's how the child does as well. And then hearing, beginning to hear otherworldly sounds, which goes with the ventral stream. So that would fit in. And then the dorsal stream, learning to take actions to it and how to combine in the brain. That would make sense. I haven't thought this through. You're in the process with me on this one. But then I would say what the Baylor material says is that smell is typically the last one. And I agree on that one because smell is enabling you to distinguish between what is good and what's bad. So that's what it does. Discernment. And discernment is part of what we call a mental feature, whereas sight and sensing and being in the room is part of our physicality. So these are what we could call the higher order levels of tactical, or the five senses that most people are using. But smell is something we forget later on. We have it when we're kids, when we're infants. We're smelling our mom, smelling our dad. We rely on smell like animals. But the whole process of when we activate the guru center, the guru centers that are connected to the mind field, then smell is one of the features that kicks in. That's what I wanted, where I wanted to go. But there is an interesting correlation between how the brain ignites and how the infant develops due to the, what we call the biological activation scheme of the physicality to be able to be a human inside this world, because it's a kind of a program that runs in the DNA. So that goes with the higher order senses. They're kind of connected. for those of us who have activated these senses slowly. And we could say, well, that's activation of different levels of the DNA, if you like. Could very well be, because if you ask of me, one of the periods in 16, I think it was, I was dealing with the NOAA group, and they were showing me a lot of this genetic engineering they were trying to do when they were doing their hybridization, enhancement of human, some of their super soldiers and some of these programs, which those of you, unfortunately, it was shut down. I had, you know, that one, for those of you who go far back, you remember that one with the reptile on my table, which was actually a human that was enhanced with specific type of alien technologies. Very, very interesting to get that insight, and some of the other things that they showed me as part of the training program I was under at the time. Whatever the purpose was, it kind of got completely derailed in 18. So it was just, it is what it is. It never really came to any conclusion, but it probably had some kind of purpose at the time. Anyways, just to put things in context, yes, we have extra layers on our DNA, but it's typically in the fourth and the fifth dimension. Of course, we know that from the colontics as well. So that's part of the activation process. And the next part of that one is, of course, also to get it implemented so it becomes part of our physicality. And when we talk, again, we go with the colontics and spiritual teaching systems, as well as the Bailey material that were written in the beginning of the from 1918 or 21 or whatever to 1959 when she died. It's just, it's been there already. The colontics did not say anything. What they added in was the alien agenda in a new and very different way than what's been out there as well. But the question is, again, how much can we trust and how much can't we trust? It's all a process. We are all putting in different, again, the elephant in the room. We are all putting in different angles to what we know. So this is part of that one as well. So let's not exclude anything. But again, as when I talked about the Quelle and I want to talk about the sayings of Jesus and the Gospels, let us remember everything is written within specific contexts, within a specific political agenda, with a specific purpose, oriented to a specific group. All sorts of information is made that way. It's targeted for a specific group. It is written for a specific group, and it has a purpose for a specific group. And it is to activate different types of genetics for different types of groups. So that one I also want to put in here. So a lot of information, a lot of look up for you, and you're kind of saying, well, you were in the middle of a process of saying something. Yeah, but I just suddenly, my energies just got sucked out of me. Just and what happened, that was when I talked about the colontics, interestingly enough. So I'll just leave that one and not bring that to the table. But when we talk about these different groups that have put out different ideas of activation and of how to reach the higher order consciousness, we must keep in mind that once we are undergoing these processes of activation, we need to put it into cultural context. We need to put it into history. We need to put it into the physicality. We need to add sciences, because that's the higher levels of our brain. We can't just do it emotionally. It can't just be spirituality driven on emotional comfort zone and guides and healing of your broken heart and your trauma and your scattered emotional field, which the majority of humans on our planet have due to their childhood, due to the way life is. Life is tough. It's difficult to mature. It's difficult to grow up and become part of this world and learn how to navigate. And you get hit by other people, by experiences, by life itself. And these are some things that comes when you get older. You get a little bit more oriented towards not fixing things. I love to fix things, but you also allow processes to be there. Understand some things are not to be fixed, but you learn to be in it. You learn to be in the process. You work with it. You find solutions to it. You find ways to navigate through it. You find ways to rise back up. You become more resilient if you learn to work with your emotions and your electrochemical processes, as the gurus did when they did the chakra meditations. That's part of that project. It's not just about reaching divinity and enlightenment and connect to that golden substance in the pituitary gland that activates your heart field and ignites the third eye, which is actually not one of the glands, because once you ignite the pituitary, that's part of the whole integration class 6, which you can get for free on my website. It's also part of, once you ignite the pituitary with the golden level, having done all of these compassion meditation, which ignites a specific level of your peripheral nervous system that begins to process and produce a specific electrochemical signature that ignites the higher levels of the pituitary gland. Then it kickstarts the pineal gland. And the pineal gland is connected to the alta major, and the alta major is connected to the basic level of the biofield and the basic level of the central nervous system. You need to kickstart that one to enable you to reach the higher mental capacities that then kickstart a center in the middle between the pituitary and the pineal gland, between the inner chakra and the alta major chakra. That substance is what kickstarts the process to the guru system that ignites the higher order perception field. So you also, if you understand that, then you also understand why sciences are so controlled within a specific paradigm, within specific paradigms that are limited, so that that process will never happen. Why religion is always focused on giving your power away, because then you won't ignite your inner guru system. Why spirituality has been oriented towards saviors and angels and whatever coming to make you feel comfortable, so you won't do the compassion meditation that ignites that substance, that ignites your inner guru, that ignites your connection to your own energy system and your own architecture, that prevents you from activating the higher order senses, from where your brain lifts itself from the neural network of frequency-based enclosure programming to actually be part of the higher order senses and the higher order sciences, where you begin to get downloads of information from reality itself, because you have ignited your higher order senses to perceive reality from the 6 highest levels of what reality is. And that is the true understanding of the Star of David. Just saying it. That's the Christ consciousness, if you want to put it that way. The Star of David, that's the hexagram, whereas the pentagram is the mind field, and the cross is the emotional field. These are programs. I talk about these in the Modern History book. And they are part of these programs that have developed humanity. You go through the cross to develop the 4 angles of your emotional field in your body as part of the activation process. That the cross leads to the activation of the pituitary. So that's why you have the compassion meditation to activate your heart field, because your heart field is what is crucified in matter. That's the understanding of crucifixion. So it's kind of symbolically speaking. So you use the cross to that one. That's why you have the compassion, the understanding of others. That's why you lift yourself from being the animal to become a morally, ethically driven human that begins to activate the purpose of life. Is not me and my desires and me and my needs and me and my sexual energies. You lift above the body. You aspire to activate the inner guru, the inner teacher. And you find that in the Gospels as well, because it especially in the Gospel of Thomas, you find that lift a stone, go in, look in a tree, whatever. I'm everywhere. The divine is everywhere. Everything, everywhere is composed of some kind of intelligent energy. But that's just the beginning of it, because I'm deliberately here saying intelligent energy. It has a coding, but it's not conscious. It's not processing information in a conscious way. A stone has intelligence. You can communicate. We see that with crystals. The finer they are, the more you can actually activate them to a degree where they begin to give off information. But it is not making it a living being. It's still a stone. But you activate the intelligence principle in things, in items, which all nature-based civilizations have known, but you're technically amplifying it with your consciousness. You're amplifying energy so it comes to life. And that's part of the transformation process. That's part of what we're doing here. That's part of this universal cycle. That's what we're here for. So that's that purpose. So that's the first step of why you need the higher order senses. Because if you're just on the 5 tactical senses that are connected to your physical form, that these senses are just for navigating in space and being in this reality and survival. It's very basic. similar to with the animals. So if you really want to go in and grow out of the beast that you, or the cross of matter that you're crucified on, where you have this orientation, that's part of the chiasm, as I explained as well, where you have that, technically goes through your heart field, you have that front and back and up and down and left and right. So that's kind of, you say that's six levels of orientation. Yes, but you can also say you have the inner human, the outer human. That's the cross, where you combine the inner human, the outer human. You have that, when I talk about that, the horizontal processes in your energy work, that's combined with the beast or the animal, man, or the biological level with the emotional level on the primitive level, where you do different processes of transforming your bioform via different types of exercises, through food, through meditation. But the goal is to get to that point where the horizontal level, that you're just on the same line of information, so to speak, being inside this reality. You need to get it into the upright vertical that ignites the inner guru, that ignites that level where you create not only your heart field, but also that center in the middle of the head that kickstarts that higher level, where the guru system, the inner chakra, is the first. That's why it has two levels. It has the outer human, the emotional biofield, navigating the world, mastering the world, and reach that point where you are, when we talk about mastering the world, is kind of going to work and being good at your work and whatever. Yes, that's part of mastery, but that's not the entirety of life. That's just kind of materialistic success. Yes, you need to have it so you know what it is, but that's not the goal or purpose of life. The mastery of life is to master who you are. It is to master your emotional processes. It is to master your brain processes. It is to master your physicality as the kid. The infant is struggling to get control of physical form. That's just part of the journey. And then we reach the teens and we get into all the emotional processes and we forget what we're doing. We never really get to the frontal lobes, and we use the frontal lobes to just justify why we're doing what we're doing. But that's not what we're supposed to do. We need to push that one step further. And that's why we need the purpose. And whatever the purpose is, it is a process. And the process is to develop yourself to the highest degree of what you can achieve. And you're now saying, oh yeah, now you're getting to the end of where you talk about the highest purity rate, the highest standards, and the highest progression rate. Yes, because the highest purity rate is your physicality, the highest standards are your emotional field. That's what religions are all about. That's the cross. How do you go from being submerged into matter and crucified on selfish desire, hedonic, service to self orientation that goes with the survival of the fittest? That's the cross. Into where you technically, and that's part of the Gospels, that's symbolic understanding of the Gospels, because the Gospels are not a story necessarily about an actual person. It could be based upon an actual person, but the Gospels are not written to portray the actual person. It's written to portray a journey, a process of reaching divinity, similar to the Guru teachings. Right? It's about reaching divinity, as simple as we see it in the Buddhist teachings. It's about reaching enlightenment. What is enlightenment? That's your inner guru. That's the inner teacher that teaches you a new orientation in life. That has nothing to do with connecting to a God that tells you what to do. As a voice in your head, yes, I've been talking to God. No, you've been talking to a parasite or a cube. Or a Quelle, which is one of the cubes. So we could spell a cube instead of spelling it with ABC, with a C, then we can spell it with a Q. So it becomes a Q-U-B-E, a cube, which is kind of what most of these people that are connecting to quote unquote source are connecting to, these cubes with a cube that are the Quelle, that are the source, that are the foundation of most religions. Wow, now I'm going to get my sorry ass kicked for that one. But let us just, that's how I perceive it. So when we're talking about having a purpose and lifting people out of that orientation that for some, they substitute their belief in some kind of ideology with some person they look up to, some kind of role model. I've had people who substituted their belief systems with mine, and then suddenly I become the one in the center that they rely on, and they get all sad and sobby and all sorts of things when I then cut loose, because I can see they're now substituting their need for having some kind of purpose focused on a person or a god, or some kind of fixed point that they can focus their power on and say, as long as I'm in contact with you, or as long as I'm in contact with that, then I have my purpose. And that's not the point. And that's when you do when you look at the Gospels as well, and when you do the Buddhist teachings, or you do the Hindu system. It's not about relying on others, that you're giving your power away. It's about finding the inner guru. It's always about finding the knowledge you have within, the wisdom you have within. And these are two different things again. So you can be very knowledgeable, but be an absolute fool and an absolute ass, right? So it's all about wisdom. It's all about what do you do with the knowledge you have. And I can see on the whole, the 2 podcasts I put on the whole project, YouTube channel, where I'm saying, it's not about what you know, but it's what you do with what you know. That title is not, people are not listening to it. That's really sad, because there's a lot of good information in there. Don't just go for the title, because I'm deliberately not giving the title away of what the content is, because I want you to understand that if you want to get the true information, don't go for the obvious. We talked about agendas. We talked about there's a reason why I'm not putting it out there clearly, as everybody's working within this field, so that we avoid certain patterns of information, because certain words connect to certain patterns of information in the collective. And I'm deliberately not putting out titles so that it's easy and obvious to see what I'm talking about. You're saying, that's annoying, Randy. No, this is to get you to understand that the journey you're on now is something completely dissimilar to what you're accustomed to. This is where you are again beginning to learn new ways of developing yourself. That's the challenge of the progression work to begin with for most, as in most of you are either in your 20s or in your 30s or in your 40s or whatever. And that's where I am telling you, you're not done. You might master the basic levels of what it means to be a human, but you're an animal human. You need to live to a higher level, and that takes an enormous amount of work. And you have to get out of all of your old habits and your comfort zones and everything that you have developed around yourself that defines who you are, that justifies who you are, your self-identification points of this is who I am. Yes, but you can be so much more. And what is it? That's so much more, and we don't know. So that's why you can't use a goal of, I want to become this or that or whatever. No, you need to use a process of, now I'm dealing with the different psychological process, the different biological processes, and the different adaptation processes of my neural network to enhance what I am, using different techniques of meditation, of clearing work, of introspection, of scientific studies, of studying the progression sciences, of understanding what you're working with on a different level, because you are completely building a new type of energy system that is beyond the 3 lower fields you have learned to master within the enclosure. You learned that as an infant and as a child and as a teenager. So the maturing process is here to understand, yes, you are mastering the 3 lower fields to whatever capacity. Many of you are not even mastering that. So that's part of this, the 7 petals of the blue flower, where you understand to get to the point where you are a whole human, a wholesome human, is that you understand it's about nutrition. It's about exercise. It's about work. How do you earn your money so you can pay your bills? It's about, or how do you get an income so you can pay your bills, and hopefully something that's not completely destroying you energetically. How do you do education? What does it mean to educate yourself? What is education? Some of it is formal. Some of it you get exams so you can prove to society that you're a good citizen. That's part of it as well. And then you have all the education you're doing on your own. And there the processes are not to skip the different levels, because that's just too easy. And you just make up your own mind and you interpret what you want to interpret. And I'm here forcing you into saying, no, you need to do scientific method on that one. You can't say, I don't want to do that. It's much more fun just to derive whatever I want from it and come up with my own funny ideas. Yes, but what you're also doing there is just you're running on the distortion dynamics of the lower levels of your neural network. You're not really lifting it up to the point of your mind where you work as in kind of we talked about the different activation of the different higher order senses, where you really learn to discern, where you learn to smell if things are good or bad. Some people have, even though they smell nice of perfume, quote unquote, they have a disgusting smell to them, which they're kind of trying to overshadow using perfume subconsciously, because they can take a shower and they don't need to smell sweat or anything, but what is in them is just so disgusting that they are yuck. For those of us who've got the high order smell, including some of the aliens that are really deteriorating. They are in the fourth dimension, but you can still smell them. You can just smell blech. They are falling apart. So that's part of some of the what we call the other density features. And so point being, I kind of said what I wanted to say here. Point being is that this journey, there are no shortcuts. This is not, oh yeah, I'll just do this and that, whatever. And for those of you who are listening to my podcasts, do all 2 of them, listen to them, re-listen to them. If you really want to do this and not just sojourning through my information because it's entertainment, fine, you're not listening, you're not doing anything. But for those of you who are really into this one, begin to understand the process of what it takes to reach higher awareness. The processes of developing not only the 5 senses and the physicality and the ability to exist in space in this weird enclosure frequency energies artificially made through different types of programmings. That is the off-learning process for many of you. And I'm saying off-learning because many of you are to reorient yourself in space, reorient yourself about what you believe reality is, to absorb and deal with these new concepts and these new ways of being human. And then you need to learn to navigate in that new space, a new way of working with your dorsal stream, a new way of verbalizing, a new way of the ventral stream, and verbalizing what you're experiencing, using your brain in a completely new way where the information you get is not similar to anything you get out there, and still work with it so it becomes what we could say a tool where we can navigate and say there are similarities. We can talk about it to each other because we are developing a similar type of language for what we're dealing with. And I can see some of the things I have gotten as well from some of the aliens I'm talking to. Other peoples are using the same terminology. So we are developing a new language for this. And that's part of the processes of the whole academy, to give these tools for the higher awareness, to give these sciences for the higher awareness, to give this new perception of reality for the higher awareness. And that's a very long learning process. It's not just about getting good information or that's fucking exciting or whatever. That's just biologically the reward system, part of the lower levels of the brain. It ignites curiosity and it's fun and what have you. And that's good. That's good. You need that. But when we really go into really working with this, then it's a strive. It's an aspiration. And that's what the gurus were doing. That's what the true Buddhists that are really working with enlightenment are doing. That's where people that are really trying to reach the higher levels of consciousness, they understand that this journey, and that's why I talked about in the last videos of the whole project, or whole Changemaker Project News, where I talk about, unless you have that drive within you, it's going to be difficult because this is not something you do because it's fun. This is something you do because it's an imperative. It's something that drives you. It's something that you have within you. No matter what is thrown at you, you know, I want to do this in spite of logical, rational, basic, desire-driven survival mechanisms. There's something in you that tells you that to survive this reality, you need to lift up to the frontal lobes. You need to activate the inner guru. You need to self-transcend. You need to lift above what you are if you really want to make it. You need to create a new type of resilience. And then all of these different processes of what it means to become a galactic citizen. What does it mean to activate the different levels of your DNA? It opens up to different spaces. But how do you navigate in these different spaces? What are the information in these different spaces? What are the beings, the humans, the humanoids, the different races in these spaces? You are relearning what it means to be human in an expanded reality, with expanded sensing, with expanded consciousness potentials, with expanded sciences, with different reality dynamics that has nothing to do with this little mud hole that we are currently bathing in. So that's part of also what we are doing, and that's what I wanted to share with you today, giving you some of the reasons why people get into the rabbit hole, because that's where they can have the purpose that is connected to a very emotional driven comfort zone that gives them purpose and existential need. But when you do the progression work, when you do the enlightenment work, when you do the inner guru Hindu teachings, all of them, when you do the true understanding of Christ consciousness, it's nothing to do with emotions. It's above the emotions. It's all about reaching the higher order sciences of what it means to have higher awareness and the realities, the seven heavens, or whatever we call it, that we connect to. And then we need to learn to navigate in these realities using our mind field. Because as long as you're just using your clairvoyant, emotional driven, spiritual oriented heart field, which is the first step of the journey, you are still connected to the, first and foremost, the astral plane. You are still connected to the distortion fields. You are connected to the fourth cycle still. You have not completed the cross. The next step of the journey is the pentagram, which you need to master. You have the upright one. You have the downright one. That's the polarity forces. That's the next step of the journey. And that's the one humanity is moving into. And general sciences are a good place to begin to have rationale and logical processing of information. But what takes us into the true orientation of the pentagram that lifts us from the beast, that's the pentagram. You lift from the beast into being the true human or the true humanoid. That's the mind field. That's the mental system that very few on this planet have got access to. Most get stuck in the compassion system, in the heart field, which is part of the journey, but it's not the entire journey. The next step is the fifth cycle, the pentagram, the higher order sciences, the higher order capacities, the ability to deal with other realities from a higher awareness point of view, from higher order scientific point of view, from higher order types of existence, from systemic energetic points of view. Learning to navigate in a space that is beyond our planet and is actually part of a complete universe, cosmic awareness. And for that, you need the mental capacity. So that's why I'm doing all of these podcasts. I'm trying to take you by the hand and saying, these are the steps. Come on, let's go. Let's go that direction. But you need to do the work yourself. You need to listen to these podcasts. You need to study the sciences, and you need to study all the things around you that I'm telling you to do. And people don't like to get told what to do, and people would like to do it in their own pace, and people do it in their own pace. But I'm trying to keep up a momentum here in these podcasts. And that is that's my plan for a while. Let's see where it goes. Every day, remind you of your new habits. Every day, remind you of the new purpose. Every day, remind you of this is the process that we are in. This is how we create the new habits. This is how we interpret the purpose. The purpose is not to save the world. The purpose is not to connect to God. The purpose is not to get into heaven and sit on the right side of God, or whatever it is, all of these different systems, the Kabbalah or whatever. The purpose has always been from all of these systems, including the Kabbalah, actually, if you really go into depth with it, it is to reach the inner guru, technically the holographic teaching system, but it's part of your biology, your architecture, everything that's behind this physical form is connected to worlds beyond this planetary system. And to navigate there, to exist there, to interpret information there, to connect to the information systems, to learn the sciences, to learn to be part of these worlds has always been the goal for everything that's going on. But the astral barrier, the frequency fence, the ability to get there is difficult. And that's part of the clearing work. That's part of the very, very, very difficult path to get there. So that's also part of the progression sciences and what I teach in the whole academy. So with that second podcast here, thank you for listening in. And if all goes well, I'll do another one tomorrow. If not, I'll do another one when the time is right, when the energy is there, and we actually have something that is worth listening to. Thank you.